The number that I remember is like $73,000 a year.
They know what the wages are coming out. Like, there's no way these schools have no idea.
I have so many other classmates who they also pay for undergrad, and they're going to be in $200 to $300 to plus $1,000 worth of debt.
Anybody that tells you that's lying to you. Like, they don't have any idea.
How do you also pay for living?
How have you dealt with the stress of knowing this debt throughout school, and how has it impacted you in the way you live?
I don't think I knew the severity of it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Veterinary Roundtable, the podcast where we answer your veterinary-related questions while having some fun along the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave us a review on your podcast provider of choice. And if you have any feedback to offer to improve the Veterinary Roundtable, let us know.
No, I was just noticing
that was good. Good job.
I'm the only one with my phone upright.
This because
Everyone
it makes it bigger.
It's easier to read
it.
but then it's more scrolling.
It is, but I can see
if you're
much,
listening
much
and you
better.
can't see us, we don't have paper copies of
We
our
failed,
itineraries.
and we
so we're using
actually
our
felt very
phones,
lost.
So we're on our
So
telephones. It doesn't feel right.
Very naked today.
All right, so before we get into introductions, what are we going to talk about, Courtney?
Courtney. We would like to promote our new socials. Well, I don't know if they're new anymore, but if you haven't checked them out, check them out. We have Instagram and TikTok at the Veterinary Roundtable, and we also have a YouTube channel where our video podcasts are published. Wow, words. And then our text message feature as well is still a great tool you can use. When you click on the episode in your podcast provider, you just hit the little link that says send us a message and you type whatever you like. And then if you want a shout out, you have to include your name. Otherwise it comes through as anonymous. And then biggest announcement of them all, make sure you are signing up and getting your tickets for the Veterinary Roundtable Live at VMX at Ole Red in January 2025.
Boom.
And you can click the link in our show notes. Early bird tickets are going very fast.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any list.
Oh my gosh. Are we allowed to say how many are tickets, Harrison? How many have sold?
So we're at 134.
I think it was
ones. Or maybe, is that low?
Is that the last
I
time
think
you
that might
checked,
be
Harrison?
low. That was last week. It was like 130 something.
Yeah.
Right now, we are at 150 tickets sold out of the 200 early bird tickets. So you will need to get 50.
Oh my
Oh my
God.
God.
50
That's
more.
crazy.
All those people
We
are
got
going
a
to be
show, gang.
All those people
And-
are going to be staring at us.
And yeah, there's only 300 tickets. And remember, all the proceeds go to the Animal Companion Project. So
Yes.
it's a good cause.
Good
It
cause.
is a good
It'll be
cause,
fun.
good time,
Good prizes.
good company,
Mm-hmm.
good
Wow.
drinks.
150.
That's not even all of them.
150. That's a lot. Okay.
Okay. I'm Dr. Ashton Duckwall.
I'm Courtney Allen.
I'm Devin Fortune.
And I'm Dr. Emily King.
Okay. Here
And
we
this
go.
Is the Veterinary Roundtable.
And-
I know.
oh,
That's
yeah.
always what I
We're
feel
the
like needs to say
Veterinary
next.
Roundtable.
Okay.
And now let's introduce our guest. She's from the Cleveland area of Ohio and got her undergraduate degree from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. She's currently a fourth-year veterinary student at The Ohio State University. She's been an athlete her whole life and played softball in college. She really enjoys being outdoors and staying active. She has a 2-year-old golden retriever named Buzz. She'll be done with vet school in April and is interested in pursuing small animal emergency medicine following graduation. Please welcome Sarah Dalzell to the Veterinary Roundtable.
Yes. Welcome.
Thanks for joining us. Okay,
Okay, we're diving
Let's
in.
get into it.
Yeah, let's
for sure, because this is a cool topic.
Okay,
So much fun.
so starting off here, what was the moment where you wanted? Oh, okay. So this is not debt stuff yet. This is general. Get to know
We're
Sarah.
doing so well.
What was the moment where you knew you wanted to become a veterinarian?
Okay. I don't think I have a specific moment, but I'm one of 4 siblings. And so I'm the third sibling. And I guess when I was 4, I was just really pushing my parents, we need to get a dog. We need an animal. We had a cat at my house growing up, but my parents had children and it then resented all of us. So it stayed in the basement, didn't even like my parents anymore. But I apparently at 4-year-old little me was really pushing for a dog. So something within me knew that I liked animals from obviously a very young age. And for my 4th birthday, got my first dog, our first family dog, I should say. She was a chocolate lab. Her name was Rosie. She's my soul dog. I mean, I have my dog now who's my soul dog, but she was the original. And honestly, from there, I just whenever anybody asks me what I want to do when I grow up, I'm I want to help animals. I want to save animals. I want to do everything I can. And my mind just never changed, which I think is really, really cool. And a lot of people tell me that they remember back when I was young, that was my answer, and it stayed consistent throughout the years. So not a specific moment, but I like specifically remember like my parents walking out with Rosie, big red bow on her back, like
Oh,
special moment for sure.
oh,
For
that's
cute.
so
sure.
cute.
Oh.
Good dog
That's
for a
sweet.
first family dog
Yeah.
too. Gotta love those labs.
Oh.
They're
Okay.
amazing family dogs.
Okay.
Okay. What made you choose OSU for veterinary school?
I think growing up in Ohio, like if you are from Ohio, you are a fan of Ohio State just because like the Buckeye culture. I'm sure you guys are familiar with
Cool book.
people from Ohio, like we're
Yeah, Sarah, you know who plays Ohio State the 21st or so, or 20th? Is it the 20th? Is it the 21st?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Tennessee.
Yeah, they do.
Are you going?
Yeah. No, because
Oh.
it's not at Tennessee. I was like, I'm going
Dang.
if it's at Tennessee. If it's at
Yeah.
Neyland State, I'm going. But it's at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Well,
So
anyway,
we'll call you back after that
Okay.
game.
yeah, okay.
Okay, keep going. I'm
We'll
sorry.
see if we still like each other.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like being from Ohio, just like knowing that Ohio State is like, first of all, such a good school. You grow up watching Ohio State football. Obviously, Ohio State football is a big thing. And I think just like their program in general is so attractive because it's just a very well-known program. They always produce like really great graduates. I feel like all of the Ohio State graduates that I've ever met, like they're great people, they're great doctors. But I feel like part of it stems from honestly just like being in Ohio, growing up in like Ohio State culture was probably like the biggest influence.
When you went to undergraduate school, what was your undergraduate degree in?
I got my undergraduate degree in biology, and then I dual majored in environmental studies. So Case Western is interesting because they didn't have a pre-vet program, and that's like
Mhm.
a whole nother thing. Is like I knew I wanted to be a vet. Do I pick a school with a pre-vet program, or do I go somewhere else? Ultimately, I probably picked Case more so for softball reasons.
Mhm.
Also, just like gaining a great degree from Case Western's like an amazing school as well. So I ultimately picked a place, just got my degree in biology and environmental studies. Yeah.
I did the same thing. I went to undergraduate to play tennis and had to do the biology track because they didn't have pre-vet. Ultimately chose the sport and I was like, oh, I'll figure it out. But I knew I wanted to be a vet
Yeah.
throughout it.
Oh my gosh, that's mine too, because I have a biology degree too.
Oh my gosh.
And I played basketball in college. So look at all of us.
Wow.
athletes.
Wow.
Wow. We're basically sisters.
Brittany and I went to accelerated programs locally.
Hey, that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, but don't you feel like I don't know. I mean, playing a sport through the undergrad is, for me, it was such a different experience than when you get into vet school and you're like, okay, it's the grind of the study. I mean, not that you didn't study in undergrad, but you had such a great outlet with team members. I mean, the other stuff in the sport, the competitions, the matches, whatever you refer to them as, that you had to focus on as well. So I feel like it actually helped me maybe not be as stressed with my academics because I
Mhm.
had to dual focus and put equal efforts into two different things. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I agree. Yeah.
Not many local colleges around here have lacrosse teams, so that wasn't really an option for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely about the sport too and what it offers.
So it sounds like the Ohio State area has a pretty great culture and things like that. So, I mean, you're saying you're enjoying Ohio, but is there anything that you would like change or you wish they would make different or like within the schooling?
I love OSU. Honestly, they actually just made a big change. I am the last class, or like my classmates and I are the last class with this previous curriculum. They did an entire curriculum change for the classes
wow.
under us. So we are the last ones to have like the old curriculum, and then all the classes under us have new. Essentially, what they switched to, so our entire fourth year is clinical rotations. It starts in like April of when third year ends and goes until April of fourth year. So it's a full year, as most other vet schools are. The goal being with changing the new curriculum is to get students into clinics actually sooner. So Ohio State's bringing the third years in. They'll be fourth years basically sooner, like I think like 6 weeks or so sooner than we got. So they'll get a few more clinical rotations under their belts. And then part of the new curriculum is that they're doing block learning. So in my curriculum, I got essentially like we took all of our systems classes at the same time, and we took intro classes first year, and then we took all the systems classes at the same time. And essentially it was like an exam every single Monday. If it was like cardio on one week, it was neuro the next week, and then it was digestive the next week. So it was exam, but they were all different things. The new curriculum is more so you're learning like body parts. So the first year is like the healthy animal. The second year is the disease animal, essentially. And they're learning it like by parts of the body. So they're learning like the entire head. In that, they're learning the osseous structures, the muscles, neuro, essentially. And then they're moving like basically to other parts of the body. And I've heard like, no matter what, it's a new curriculum. I've heard mixed reviews on it. I will say that I'm glad that I'm part of the old curriculum just because like it was working. All of the other classes before me like had a really high NAVLE pass rate. And that was something that I didn't really have to worry about. And like they knew that it worked when they got to the clinical year that like they were taught correctly. As with any like big changes, like there are going to come some bumps. And I've talked to a lot of like the underclassmen, and I think things are obviously being worked out. And that it will probably make more sense the way that they're learning things, especially because like things will get repeated. So they learn a healthy heart during first year, and then they learn heart disease the second year. Like it'll eventually make you repeat having to learn just like basic physiology again, which like the more repetition you get, the better it is anyway. So I personally am thankful that I was on this old curriculum, but again, like either way we're learning from like some of the top people in our profession. So, yeah, I've truly enjoyed my time.
Does it extend the time in the clinicals, like, or is there just extra rotation? So if you're an internal med, does it go from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, or is it just add on an extra block, I guess, or whatever?
There's just more blocks. Yeah, there's just more blocks in general to take. I think right now they're only like pushed 6 weeks. Like they have an extra 6 weeks. So it's not technically enough to have like 3 week long rotations. So I think they're all still 2 weeks. And I could be speaking incorrectly. Like I don't exactly know how the new curriculum works. This is just essentially like my understanding of it. But I think they just get more clinical rotations, more chances to take electives, things like that.
Which is good because I mean, doing the hands-on, seeing stuff is just so critical.
Yeah,
the more you can do it, the better.
Like, clinical year for me has been like a night and day difference. Like I can learn from a textbook and I can learn from slides, but actually like seeing cases, like I can actually, I'm not a horse person at all, but like I can remember things about horses because I actually saw cases about them. Yeah,
that's awesome. I feel like it's like a love-hate. I appreciated the clinics for what it was and what the purpose it was supposed to serve, but gosh, some of those blocks were just difficult because you never slept. Like the hours, I do know I went to Purdue, and I do know that they fixed that because of how, I mean, dangerous it can be when you don't get enough sleep. And so they switched it, from what I've heard, the way that the ER, when you're on call and things like that, work when you're during those hard blocks, which is nice. Like they allocated a specific clinical block for ER, which was nice. I think really helpful for the fourth year students. But I think I would assume taking that pressure out of it, it makes it a little bit more enjoyable for at least the students at Purdue. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear about that.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's torture if you're tired and trying to learn. And I mean,
when you're that tired, you don't learn anything. You don't absorb anything.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk debt.
Let's talk debt.
Let's get
Okay.
into it.
Yes.
So you were an undergraduate athlete. So then was your undergraduate school, did you have a scholarship then for your undergraduate degree?
I did not. I went to a Division III school, so no athletic scholarships. I was just fortunate enough to have parents who were willing to pay for my undergraduate degree. So I knew going into just like college in general that I would have my undergraduate degree paid for. But if I wanted to go to advanced schooling, which I did, I knew I would have to pay for vet school.
Yeah.
That bill was going to be yours.
Yes. So were you aware of like the debt prior to applying to vet school?
I think like I knew that I had to take on debt. I don't think I knew the severity of it, right? Like I don't think anybody really knows about the severity of it because it's not talked about a lot. And it's just like, oh, well, you're going to be a doctor. You can pay it off. Like obviously a lot different than that. So no, I think the concept of it, I knew. I don't think the severity of it, I quite understood.
I think that's a great way of describing it.
Yes.
Because like I think we're all aware of like, okay, we're taking a loan, but
Sure.
then like the severity of what it's going to do to you or how it changes, you know, what things you have access to or, you know,
because
what
I think when it
challenges you're
comes
going to have.
down to it, most veterinarians, if you ask them when they wanted to be a vet, it was when they were young. Most, not all, but so it's a dream, right? And it's like, how do you put a price tag on this dream that you've been wanting to fulfill, and then you finally get in? It's like a lot. I mean, at least for me, I knew I was like, oh, I mean, I did it. Like everything else will work itself out in my head, and then of course you become an adult and. Like, oh, crap. Which doesn't work out. You have to pay it to work out.
So did anybody ever talk to you about, like, at either of the institutions, the debt that you were going to incur or what that was going to look like? Or was there any kind of advising around that topic?
Yeah. I would say in my undergraduate institution, we had a pre-vet club that was 5 or 6 students. And, you know, an advisor for the club who was just interested in animals. Like we didn't have a super built up system. So during undergraduate, I didn't get a ton of information. Getting into vet school, I give OSU a lot of credit. I think first year, we had what they call, and we had this then every year after, but like right off the bat, we had they call it the Be Well Financial Summit, where essentially it was either one day of the week. It was like kind of like a 3-hour period that was built into our curriculum, required for us to go to, required that we actually like participate in it, explaining everything, explaining private loans, public loans, what your loan debt looks like, what your debt to income ratio means, what like your loan repayment options are. And then in addition to just like kind of that general talk that we had other like elective options to take on. So we could talk about home buying, or we could talk about like business owning and things of that nature. So OSU did a really good job of kind of laying the law of like, okay, assess how much debt you're going to be in. Here's the VIN student debt calculator, which I don't know if many people know about that because it was preached to us, but VIN, Veterinary Information Network, has like a student loan debt calculator that you can use. So amazing. You can essentially put in how much estimated loans you think you're going to have, how long you think you're going to repay it for, and all of those things like that. And it can essentially give you a better number. But yeah, OSU, I think, did a really good job of helping us understand. Awesome. It's terrifying going into your first year of veterinary school, and you're like, I'm just trying not to drown. And then you're being told all of these things, like you're going to be in a lot of debt. You may not even be able to pay it back. It's scary, but I do appreciate them for still like touching on it, because a majority of the students here, like not all of our parents are paying for our schools. Most of us are taking out loans. Most of us are planning on either repaying or going into forgiveness. But yeah.
That's awesome that they did that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's amazing.
I'm glad that they
built into the curriculum like that.
Would you say that the idea of debt affected your decision at all on where you attended, or were you pretty decided on Ohio State?
I think like the decision of Ohio State, once I stepped foot on campus, I knew I wanted to be here. The hard thing was that I applied like in 2020. I submitted my application in 2020. All of the interviews were still over Zoom because of COVID. So most of the time you go to interview at a vet school and you like go to see the vet school. I didn't have that luxury. I applied to 7 schools total. One of them was out in Arizona because that's where my husband at the time was living. And it was Midwestern out in Arizona. That was actually the first school I had also heard back from, just because they did rolling admissions. So once you applied and did the interview, like if you applied early, did your interview early, you heard back soonest. So I heard back from them the soonest that I had actually gotten into school. And since obviously my husband at the time was living out there, like I heavily considered going to Midwestern. I hadn't heard back from Ohio State. And seeing how much they charge for tuition, because it's a private institution and because I would be out of state, was actually a big deterrent of mine. Looking back, I got into Ohio State. I always knew I wanted to go to Ohio State. It probably wasn't going to affect my choices, but like I remember at that time being in like a mental pickle of like, I would love to move out here and live with my husband, but also like I can't accrue that much debt because it was quite expensive.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was?
Um, at the time, the number I have, like, just this could be completely wrong, but the number that I remember is like 73,000 a year.
Whoa. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that, yeah.
It's like the overseas, you know what I mean? Like the
That's, yeah.
Ross ones. And
But that was just for tuition. That wasn't for like room and board and like all that. Or I don't know if you live on campus. But
Yeah. No, so I would essentially be paying for like obviously and usually they come up with some form of an estimate of like what your cost of living will be. But that's usually separate from tuition
Right,
numbers.
exactly.
So
That's what,
the round number that I remember is 73. I think the 73 was just tuition and like school fees. However, I could be wrong. That could have some included like housing costs in it. But usually the housing cost that they put in is also like the lowest level of living that like most people can't achieve just because like housing is crazy and groceries are crazy and all those things.
Everything.
Wow. Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Ultimately, it didn't change my decision. And luckily, it being at Ohio State, I was granted in-state tuition. Ohio State's interesting in that you don't have to be a resident of Ohio to get years 2 through 4 in-state tuition. So essentially the way that they kind of like combat costs is they just charge more during your first year if you're out of state. And then after you're like done with that first year, years 2 through 4, we're all charged the same amount, whether you're from Ohio or not. So Ohio's kind of like on the cheaper end for most vet schools, probably because of that reason, honestly.
That's a good fact.
But I at least didn't have to like my first year, I didn't have to pay that extra, say 20 grand. I'm not sure the number, but say like 20 grand. I mean, that's a reasonable amount of debt.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, in-state in general is just starkly different than the out-of-state fee, which is crazy.
Yeah. Do you think that you had said in your bio that you are going to consider doing ER work? Was that choice driven out of the potential, like for earning potential and paying back loans? Was it mostly just your interest in that area of veterinary medicine?
Yeah, I think it's mostly my interest. Most of my experience thus far in veterinary medicine is small animal general practice. I worked summers and winters during undergrad at a small animal general practice. I love small animal general practice. That clinic that I worked at uniquely was walk-in only style clinic. So they were a GP, but they saw emergencies quite regularly. They had a super busy surgery schedule. Every day was very different. And I actually really liked that aspect of that practice in hindsight. I've since worked at like 2 other small animal general practices since then. And I think that I still really enjoy general practice. I love general practitioners. Like, I think that might be an end goal for me. But for whatever reason, like I felt like I was needing more. And that could have just been like the clinics that I had experienced, but I felt like I was needing more and kind of wanted to dip my toes in emergency medicine. I actually had applied to work at a specialty in emergency practice like the summer before my 3rd year, just to gain emergency experience. And they placed me in dermatology, which is so funny. Because I like wanted emergency experience so badly. It was placed in dermatology. Hindsight, love the dermatology doctors and everybody that I worked with there. And I gained so much derm knowledge, which is like also so helpful for GP. So no matter where I end up, it was useful. But it's just so funny because I wanted to get that experience to know whether or not I liked emergency. Because again, like I felt like I needed more stimulation. I needed faster pace. I needed kind of like the hectic craziness of that walk-in clinic that I really enjoyed. And then I don't think it was really until I started exploring emergency options, looking into what that would look like. And obviously I'm seeing a price increase for emergency veterinarians. They're in higher demand. They usually will make more because the services cost more, those types of things. So obviously, like in looking into it, is part of my decision driven on that, maybe subconsciously. And then I realized after going through my emergency rotation, actually like at OSU, going through my ICU rotation, like I really enjoy emergency, like triaging, stabilizing, figuring out what's going on. How can I best help this pet in this exact moment? I really like that aspect of emergency medicine.
That's awesome.
So I'd like to say no, but I'm sure part of me in the back of my head is like, but I can also make more money. And in the end, like, yes, we're talked to about our different options in school about what our options are for paying back debt. And essentially the two big ones are either you pay it off or you look into possible public student loan forgiveness. I personally am a person that just like does not want to be in debt forever. I don't want to be in debt for the government for the next 25 plus years and then maybe hope for public student loan forgiveness and then like also pay a crap ton of money down the line because of this tax bomb. Like that just sounds very unappealing to me. And looking at essentially one of the other factors that they talk to us about is your debt to income ratio. So like evaluating how much debt I'm going to come out of school with, evaluating what my income is when I get out of school, and is it even feasible to do that? And I think if I find the right place, I find the right job, I know my worth, that like it is feasible to actually pay that back. But there are some students, like, again, I had my undergraduate degree paid for. So like that's other debt that I don't accrue right now, which is amazing. But I have so many other classmates who like, they also paid for undergrad and they're going to be in $200 to $300 to plus $1,000 worth of debt. And then the majority of us are going to go into small animal general practice. And depending on where you work and depending on where you are, like your debt to income ratio just like is not going to suffice a way to pay back your loans. Unless you're the most like, and I'm not going to say never, right? People are going to find ways to do what works for them and everything. But it's scary to think about. And it's difficult for sure.
I mean, you've said it before when we've talked about debt. It's like, do you make that decision where you just kind of grind it out for X amount of years and know that it's going to be hard, but you get that at the upfront? And in this scenario, what we're talking about, emergency medicine, do you come out? Because I think there was a listener question we had about a married couple coming out.
Yes,
with
they were both going to
dual debt. ER. Yeah. So it's like, okay, knowing ER schedule wise isn't as flexible, or I don't know what word you want to use there. Cushy,
appealing,
I guess,
honestly.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Appealing. Yeah, that's a great word. Yeah. So, some people may look at, well, ER, like you said, is not my end goal, but if that's the best way to get to the end goal. Yeah.
Well, and I think you're really smart to not rely on the government to fix your problem. I mean, the only person that can fix your problem is you. And so, being disciplined and, staying after it, with that amount, I agree with you. When we were looking up the numbers for Ohio State, I think it's one of the more reasonable institutions, in terms of debt over 4 years. I think it might even be slightly lower than Purdue, or it's like right there around the same somewhere. But, the amount of money that, I just can't imagine carrying the debt until you're somebody my age, and then now you're going to retire, or it's going to get forgiven, and then you're going to pay taxes on what's forgiven. Like, I think people don't realize like all of that, and then you're hoping that the tax policy stays somewhat the same over 25. Right. Like, anybody that tells you that's lying to you. Like, they don't have any idea, and so you're relying on somebody else to fix your problem, and it's not a wise way to live. So that's great you're doing that. So, and you can, pay it off over 5 or 7 years, and be done with it, and then have freedom to use the money how you need to use your money, kind of a thing, versus being beholden to the dollar.
Well, and I will never forget when I was in school, I think it was my 3rd year, in the summertime, I worked at just a general practice, out of town from school, but the veterinarian there was 5 years out of school at the time. And I was there that day. She wrote her last check for her student loans and sent it in the mail, and had like a mini party at the clinic for it. And I was thinking, like, she's only 5 years out and she's in GP. She did it.
That's nice.
Yep. She was done. So, I mean, even when it's not ER, it can still be done. Granted, at the time I didn't, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I probably would have asked more questions about how she was able to achieve it, but now, I mean, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through a whole lot of changes, so things are different. But anyway, it can be done. So
you just have to make sacrifices, like we've talked about.
Yeah, I think your point about the debt to income ratio, like we were talking about doctors and their debt to income ratio, and the differences between PAs and MDs and all this past little bit, and in human medicine, it's the right direction. It's 2 to 1. And in veterinarians, it's 1 to 2. And so that's the problem, or whatever, is that they're lopsided. And so I don't know how, it's crazy. It's just crazy. I don't know how these students with $300,000, $350,000 in debt, how you ever feel like you can get out from under the thumb.
Yeah.
And being beholden to the dollar is not a comfortable way to live.
No,
correct.
Like from the standpoint of like feeling like that's what's going to drive your decision making, whether it be in the exam room, which can create anxiety and stress, all the way to, being at home, and feeling like that's all you're thinking about.
Yep.
And so it's a really important topic. I'm glad that they spend time talking to you guys about it.
I know, that's huge. I don't think we ever had any discussions like that. Granted, I've been out 5.5 years, so I would hope maybe things have changed by now, but.
Well, I think the cost is just skyrocketed that it's ridiculous at this point. So, I think that they would probably be under quite a bit of scrutiny if they didn't
What is
seem to
OSU
educate
right now for tuition?
We looked at, was it 170?
It was one. I think so.
170 something. Does
For
that
the
sound
whole
right,
4 years?
Sarah?
That sounds about right.
It
Yeah,
said
I think. Go ahead.
It said, well, this says just Google. It said like residents, it's 159,000 for the 4 year, and then non-residents, it's 201,000.
Probably because of that first year,
Roughly.
the difference of the first year.
Is that number that you have just tuition cost?
Yes, that does not include books, room and board, miscellaneous, blah, blah, blah.
So that's the other thing that I feel like I didn't understand until getting here is like, how do you also pay for like living? Oh,
Right.
also a loan. So
Yeah.
like add a decent few thousand to the back of that number for like each semester that you're here, because like unless you have a full-time job, which some people do, I don't understand how, but more power to them. But like unless you have a job that's helping you pay for your rent or pay for your food, I actually don't understand. And I've been blessed that I live with my husband and I've been able to split everything like 50-50, but most students live by themselves and they pay for rent by themselves and groceries by themselves. So I think that's another thing. If I had to guess, I know that my number is going to be somewhere between like 150 to 200,000 by the time I'm done with school. Like that's somewhere within where my number is. And that's with like me not having to check for a while. But also like 4th year is more expensive because it's an entire year. So like I've been paying smaller amounts. And then this past year I had to take out the max amount of the federal loan that I could, in addition to more loans to pay for school in different ways because of how expensive 4th year is.
So, being in literally the midst of it, coming to the end of it, how have you dealt with the stress of knowing this debt throughout school, and how has it impacted you and the way you live?
Yeah. I was told by probably that financial advisor, like first year, also just by my parents, like take out the absolute minimum amount that you can to borrow, because that's less that you have to pay back. I also have classmates who take out the absolute maximum that they can because they don't want to worry about money. They don't want to feel like they're worried about having to like wait until the end of the semester, absolutely have their bank account run bone dry before they get another loan refund. So I'm on one end of the spectrum where I do try and borrow the absolute least amount as possible. But then I run into areas like, it's December right now. It's coming up on Christmas. I haven't had a loan payment since August. Like it's scary. And it's to the point where it's not lovely, but there's always there's ways to take out more money, things like that. I don't love that feeling. It's that feeling at the end of every semester. As I'm sure you guys probably experience too, like when the loan runs out, there's not anything there. I think what I tell myself is just that like I can accrue as much debt as I'm going to, but I'm ultimately doing this because this is what I'm meant to do, truthfully. Like I really want to do this. I think that this is my calling. I think that this is what I'm meant to do for my life. And no matter how much debt that I get, like it'll get paid off. I'll do the best that I can once I'm out of school to pay it off as soon as I can, because that's a personal goal of mine. But even if it doesn't get paid off as soon as I absolutely can, it'll get paid off eventually. Ultimately, like I value my my life and my happiness and all of those other things way more than I do the debt that I'm accruing. So I think just keeping the positive outlook of like, that'll be fine. It could always be worse. That'll be fine.
Now, this may be a loaded question because you may not know, but is that like a shared sentiment between other classmates and friends that you have in school right now? Have you guys like talked? Do you share that conversation of debt, and how do they feel?
I personally, just based off of like a friend that I have, we have these conversations because like there are other projects in our classes that we've had early on in our curriculum where like we come up with the budgets and we come up with this and this and that. And I just have heard them like talk about like, well, I'm not going to worry about the coffee that I buy myself every week because like that coffee makes me happier than like not buying it for myself or something like that. Like getting yourself a sweet treat every week. Like that's better for your mental health than it is not. So I think I've had a good support system in terms of like chatting with other people about it, and kind of gaining their perspective. I think that the shared stress is mutual for sure.
Yeah.
Anytime the topic of our loans come up, anytime that Be Well Summit came around every year, because we had it for our first 3 years through school, like you don't love to hear it. And every single time you go out of it, you feel a little bit more beat up because you're essentially just reminded about, everything else that's going on. But they're conversations that need to be had in the end.
Do you feel like the school should be doing something different to change the cost of tuition to make it less expensive?
I think that's such a hard question to answer, honestly, because ideally, yeah, I mean, this is a public university. We should, in theory, be getting, federal funds, et cetera, things like that. And the fact that there's a price to our learning and the fact that the price is so high and that they know that we are not making equivalent amounts when we graduate. So I don't know if that's a more so of a problem of the schools charging so much versus our industry being underpaid. It's so hard to say.
What do your classmates think though about if you're underpaid because this is a conversation we have quite frequently about, okay, so we want everybody to be paid more. So if we want everybody to be paid more, prices have to go up.
Yeah.
So if prices go up, then
we're at the same ratio.
Right. We get backlash.
Yeah.
Jinx. And so like it's this conundrum. It's this circular argument, that you continue to see in the veterinary world.
Yes.
And my husband drives him bananas because he's like, people need to, you can't have both things. You can't have higher wages and maintain the prices the way they are. And so it's just this, do you guys talk about those things as students and go, okay, like, yeah, how do I make all of this make sense?
I don't think we talk about it as, I feel like the main aspect that we talk about it as, is kind of like evaluating individual, like where you want to end up. If you want to end up in this area doing this job, calculating what a revenue might be, back calculating what a salary might be. Based off of that, I feel like we don't talk about that full circle of that. However, we do talk about spectrum of care a lot here at Ohio State in terms of like what our main like GP clinic is literally called like the spectrum of care clinic, meaning that we are teaching in these learning veterinarians. Yes, being in a veterinary teaching institution, you can do A, B, C, D, E, F, and then still might not get any answers. And then you spent a whole lot of money and things are really expensive versus you can just try things and you can maybe not do every single ideal test, but like using your differentials and like pushing one towards the other. I think that we do a better job in terms of like trying to lower costs where costs need to be lowered. But I don't think that we've had a ton of conversations about just like really needing to break that cycle somewhere. Cause I feel where is it going to be? It's so hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. Absolutely. You brought up an interesting thing in terms of, I call it guessing. So like I don't know. I think it's probably from the time you graduated, like maybe since you've graduated. I think they're doing a better job of the students because pricing has become, it is so expensive to get care. So for some people, I think they're starting finally to start to teach students like, okay, I can't do all of the things like, and especially even when I graduated, it was like, this is your roadmap. Like, you're going to do this, 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 and then this. And, you know, I mean, how many times have I said, don't skip x-rays before you go to ultrasound?
Yeah.
Right. Because they've like taught us this like routine of doing things.
Don't do Serinia if you don't have abdominal x-rays.
Right. Like, I mean, like there's like so many things they used to teach us about.
As soon as I worked with Kate.
Yeah. And so like, it's like all of these things now are like, you're shifting because now I think we have to be better at guessing in terms of looking at the whole animal. What is it, you know, looking at everything, the history, the animal, what does it look like in the room? You know, what is it changes? And that's why it's so valuable to see the same animal over and over again, because then you can be better at guessing. But I think teaching students about guessing does help owners from the standpoint of pricing, you know, and being able to afford care that they need, you know. I don't know. It's an interesting concept.
Well, and just truly setting up that expectation with the owner. They have to understand where you're coming from by not having certain tests done and certain answers. And I think every time I find where there is either frustration from a client or they had a bad experience or something like that, it comes down to they were expecting one thing, like, oh, we didn't do diagnostics, but we still did these meds and my dog should be better, my cat should be better. Whereas there was no communication on that in between of like, it could be this, all that stuff. So I think it's twofold of like, yeah, you start to learn to be good at doing those educated guesses, but it's not going to mean crap if you can't explain why you're doing it to the owner. Yeah. And I mean, it's tricky because you also don't want to be like, well, you can't afford this, so I'm just going to do this. You know, you have to read between the lines a little bit there. But
well, and I think it's going to be interesting because there's 13 new veterinary schools.
12
or something like that.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have, I think the AVMA just commissioned a study from Brake Consulting about there not truly being a shortage of veterinarians, that it's all kind of veterinarian, the graduation rate of veterinarians is meeting or exceeding the pet population owned households or whatever. So like, okay, we're going to have enough veterinarians, which is going to drive down because of cost. I mean, because of supply and demand. So now we're going to have salaries being driven down potentially because you're going to have more competition among who gets jobs and whatnot. And so it's going to be very interesting to see. And then you load the school debt on top. You know what I'm saying? So like now you load the school debt on top of it. And I'm thinking like these schools, like they have to do something. Something needs to change with the schools because
But like you made a great point, Sarah. It's like they know what the wages are coming out. Like there's no way these schools have no idea or have this like blind thought that we're coming out of school and making X amount of money and paying off debt, no problem. Like there's no way. They have to recognize that this is an issue, but yet that's where I think we just kind of want to bang our head against the walls. It's like, okay, if they know this, if we know this, where does it break? Yes. Like what's the reasoning behind going up to $73,000 a year for a school in Arizona? That's insane.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
Is it the argument that there's still X amount of people who want to apply to vet school, but there's only so many seats? Maybe. I don't know. Like they're not hurting to have people apply to vet school. I don't know. So they see it keep coming in. So they're like, all right, well, keep going up.
Keep going up.
No.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, they are a business. I mean, they are interested in just making money.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a real problem.
I know.
It's going to continue to be a real problem. And they are saying, this is what you guys need to ask to be paid. This is what you need to ask to be paid. You're worth this much. You're worth this much.
That
You're worth this
conversation in
much.
school.
You know? Well, you know, the owners of the clinics are like, I can't pay you that much.
Right.
Because, you know, we don't make that much money. You know, like you have to pay for yourself as a veterinarian. So you have to be able to generate money and it has to stay within a certain percentage in order for everything else to work.
Yeah.
Your biggest expense as a business owner is going to be payroll. Hands down is payroll. So like all of that has to fit into this magic equation of percentages.
Yeah.
So how do you pay the veterinarian? You have to raise prices.
Yep.
But if you raise prices, you're in it for the money.
Right? That's what you're going to hear from the clients.
Yeah.
But what's
You can't make
interestingly
everyone
enough,
happy.
and I'm on a rampage here,
It's a hot topic, Sarah.
is that you're going to hear it. You will hear it from your employees. You're raising prices. Why are we raising prices? And I
Yes.
want to stab my eyes out because I'm like, I want to
So
pay a
hear it from the
technician. Why are you laughing at me? I
No,
want to pay a
because I know what you're
technician
saying. I hear
$30
it
an hour.
too.
I don't need a technician telling me that I'm raising prices. Why are you raising
Yeah.
prices? Well, because I want to pay you what you're worth.
Yeah.
So
We're
like,
only asking because we hear it from the clients.
right? So like, but like you're, it's just, it's the most fascinating ass backwards system.
That's the best way to put it right there.
Mhm.
It was
And,
beautiful.
and you don't have health insurance. I mean, we do, but it's such a minute,
Mm-hmm.
dismal proportion of
Mhm.
patients that have it.
Yeah.
Not that I want to go down that road. Like as
No.
far as like an industry.
One issue at a time on this podcast.
Right. I'm telling you what.
Well, maybe just start
We need to get school
start
debt
a
lower.
conversation right
know
now.
how.
I know you're gone in April. It's never too late.
That's right,
Rally
Sarah.
some troops and say, let's help the people out there
Get the debt down.
get the debt down. That's right.
There's
You're
so
in
many
charge.
creative things that people could do. I mean,
I
not people,
know.
not students. In the industry.
I mean, that's
Why
the
don't
thing,
these
too.
huge
They're-
companies, IDEX, Hills, Royal Canin,
Purina.
Antec, Purina,
Yeah.
why aren't they giving scholarships to students? You know,
I
Do
think
well. That's
so.
actually a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys were talking about that, but I was gonna dive into scholarships. So another great thing that OSU does, well, first of all, we have a laundry list of alumni and organizations who donate to a scholarship fund, and we every year have like a scholarship application to apply. I've been so lucky to receive, I think, multiple scholarships at this point from OSU to help with my tuition, which has been amazing. And I've talked to other classmates who also get scholarships. So it's not like
That's good.
they're there, but they're so sought after and we're not getting them. Like, no, I got one. And I know a few friends who have gotten some scholarships. And they're not minute scholarships either. I mean, they're not life changing and my debt's not, or my tuition's not going away. But it's, I'm taking less out, which has been great. So I think I know that that's a big push that they're doing. I obviously have no idea how in the world they determine what the actual tuition rate is. And I'm sure that it's very complicated. And I'm sure that it maybe has been explained to me at one point or another.
It's okay. You have enough
but-
in your brain.
that's right.
but they do a big push on scholarships. And it's not like they're just like floating in the air. Nobody actually gets them. Like we actually do get them here. So I think that's one way to combat, at least that Ohio State tries to do, which has been great.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least
I know
helps
you
with the debt.
mentioned having a plan to address your debt. So if you don't mind speaking to it, I think our listeners might benefit from just getting some opinions. Do you mind sharing your plan?
Yeah. I don't have a full laid out plan. I'm more
Sure.
of a go with the flow type of person, at least when it comes in terms of finances. I think once I actually like secure a job and know what my job offer is going to be like, I can actually like put my
Mhm.
money where my mouth is in terms of going down that road. But like a loose goal of mine is to have no debt 10 years out of school. So my goal is to pay it within 10. I'm part of this Facebook group, which has actually been very both encouraging and discouraging, called Debt Free Veterinarians. I recommend if anybody is in vet school or newly out of vet school or just anybody in general, join Debt Free Veterinarians. Seeing people's stories of how they've paid their debt off within like 3 years. And then everybody's in the comments,
awesome.
oh my God, what did you do? People take inside jobs from just like buying properties and leasing them out, or like they'll give examples. But I think joining that group has really helped me mostly encourage. Obviously there's the cases in there that are, you know, the odd end of the group. But yeah, my goal is to not have any debt, at least student loan debt, and hopefully no other debt, 10 years, post graduation.
Okay.
And another like caveat to that is I do want to have children. And I know that like having children is going to be expensive as well. So we'll see how that fits in, but that's another tie into my goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds feasible.
Yeah, I think as life changes, you start to, yeah, there's like my husband always likes to say there's your good debt and your bad debt, right? And so it's kind of fitting in like, unless you can, go buy your house straight up, that's amazing. But, that's a debt. So, but for like, I don't know, personally speaking, I'm only 5.5 years out. I have not paid off my debt still, but what our setup has been, and we have a daughter too, which obviously changed things around, but we just said basically my paycheck goes straight to my debt. And then obviously depending on your life circumstances and what your goals are, trying to live off of then, in your case, your spouse. Now, not everyone has that option, right? So it's always a different scenario. But as far as like years of that, well, having a daughter changed it a little bit, but I had similar goal of like 10 years out, be done. It adjusted over time with, obviously we had the COVID stuff, and it froze our interests on. So I was able to obviously get ahead of that, which was really great. But I hope there's no future pandemic again, because that was
not worth
the
it.
worst thing ever. It was bad working through that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I just think it's a good goal to have. It's realistic to have that goal, even if you have kids in your future too, because it still can be the same goal. You just find other tune ways how you adjust that payment then. So just depends.
Yep.
Different ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Where are we at on our questions?
I got nothing else.
We've got one
We're just
more.
been
I think
flowing.
we hit on everything.
Okay.
We could ask the final grand finale.
The grand finale?
Shall
Is
we?
that actually number 7?
I think so.
Okay. Grand finale. You ready?
Bum, bum.
Ready.
What's your advice for those interested applying or attending vet school regarding the debt? Or in general, honestly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Regarding debt, I would say if you know that this is the profession that you're meant to do, you're born to do, you absolutely are 100% committed. Don't let the debt scare you. Like, obviously, seeing that large number, knowing what salaries are going out of school, scary to think about. But it's ultimately like what you want to do with your life. Again, I prioritize the quality of my life so highly above, the debt will get taken care of when it gets taken care of. Like, that's future me's problem. But I would say, first of all, don't let it discourage you. Second of all, I think having these conversations about debt in general. So if you're at a vet school that doesn't talk about it, I was fortunate to have obviously a program that did. Talk to somebody within your school to see like, hey, can we have somebody come talk to us about student loan debt and what my options are for repayment, and like just like what it is in general. Because I feel like going into school, I really didn't know much. And honestly, having those sessions here at school helped tremendously. Just me understanding like what it even is and what my options are. Other just like vet school advice in general. I would say apply to as many schools are within your reason. Just applying to schools are expensive. We're talking about money right now. So let's talk about that. Applying to schools themselves are expensive. I applied only to schools that I had the prereqs for and that I could afford. And that didn't require the GRE because I didn't want to take the GRE. And most schools, honestly, at this point, like don't require that at all.
Yeah.
So apply to as many schools as you can. I truly believe that I was meant to go to Ohio State and that I was meant to be here, but I also believe that it's kind of like a flip of the coin, like almost like a lottery type of situation as to where you're going to get into, based off of the applicant pool at the time, based off of what your personal experiences are. Obviously grades play into it, but if you have a ton of experience and you're super interested in certain things and you just like are a good person, like the vet school can be a good place for you. Yeah. I've loved my time here at Ohio State. It's actually so crazy that 4 years goes by so fast because I feel like it was just starting and now I'm almost done and then I'm going to have to be an adult.
Well, I'm glad you've had a nice experience there. It sounds like
that's
you really
awesome.
enjoyed it.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
I love Ohio
Good.
State. I love my teachers. I really like no complaints.
That's
Where I was
awesome.
meant to be, for sure.
You're lucky.
That
Good.
is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Absolutely.
like I complained along the way, but like probably not
Well,
about
now you
the
can see the
school
light at the end of the
itself.
tunnel. So you're
Yeah.
like, this is
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah,
This is
you took that
excellent.
Navly. You're riding high.
Yeah, you're
That's
feeling
all right.
good right
So
now.
great.
Like,
So
I
great.
love it live.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast this evening and using the little time you do have to share it with us. So we
Yes.
really appreciate that. Yeah. So, okay. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Veterinary Roundtable. Remember, send in those questions and be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at the Veterinary Roundtable. If you enjoyed this episode or a previous episode, leave us a review on your podcast provider of choice. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Veterinary Roundtable.